Testing 1, 2, 3. Hi gang, thank you for joining me again today. My name is Dan. That's the wrong color. Do you ever do that? You're looking at your palette and you think you've mixed up the right color, and then you put it down and go, egads. I think everybody does that. I'd like all you beginners, quote unquote, to know that it happens to everybody. So don't beat yourself up or think that that's an unusual thing. Quite typical, I assure you. Just a second here and I'll begin to get official. All right, put these down and tell you that this is Daily Art Adventure number 942, starting the final edit on Roman ruins. Thank you all for playing along with me, putting up Hello Uncle. Oh yeah, color checker. You mean like Mark Carter uses? Yep. I like it. Don't bother. I like the idea. It is a great, in fact, I teach other people that they should use it, but I don't know if I'd use it myself. All right, let me zoom in here as tight as I can. Tell you what, I better do the old trick of moving the camera. Otherwise, I'll forget to zoom back out. All right, I want you to be able to see the nature of my marks. When I teach out, back in the olden days, before coronavirus, when I would teach painting art classes live, painting classes live, this is the part of my instruction, as much as I try not to. This is the part that usually gets the short end of the stick. Now, first, I'll tell you why, first of all. Part of the reason is that when I enter what I call the final edit, which used to be the final layer, but in the last couple, 2.5, 3 years, has taken a back seat. Several other things happen after this layer, so, but it still serves the editorial function, because I'm painting with opaque, or ostensibly, that is to say, so to speak, opaque, because sometimes what I call opaque is actually translucent. But again, ostensibly, so to speak, it's opaque paint. And because it's opaque, that means I can cover stuff up, right? And the reason this very often gets the short end of the stick when I'm teaching is because I feel like this is the part that people don't need to see. Now, I'm sort of wrong about that, but here's what's right about that. When I am now painting, if you will, just in this phase, in this stage, I'm painting like an ordinary oil painter. That is to say, I'm painting straight out of the tube oil paints, which are more or less opaque. If I do add any medium, which would be liquid, I would still use liquid, but the only reason for adding it would just be sometimes I want the paint to flow a little more freely. But other than that, it's more or less straight out of the tube and opaque. And so, again, that means I'm painting the way your mama did. Assuming, of course, that your mama was a painter. What I should really say is I'm painting the way my daddy did. That's true. Traditional painter. All right, so that's why this I'm almost out of the camera, aren't I? So I hope I remember to move you when I grow up. So that's why this step often gets short shrift. But, big but coming up here. The fact of the matter is, and I've learned this over the years of teaching, the fact of the matter is students really do need to watch me and see how to paint this phase, this stage of the painting process. Most specifically because if I leave the students to their own devices, if I just leave them alone, they will pretty much inevitably, 85% of them will all make the same mistake. And that is they will cover up, plaster is my favorite word, but otherwise obliterate all of the underpainting. And I always envision those students driving home and scratching their heads and saying to themselves, well, I don't get it. Why did we do all those hours and hours and hours of underpainting when we just covered it all up in the final edit layer? Okay, can I answer that question? I hope it's obvious. Because you are not supposed to plaster, obliterate, cover up. So you can already see by what's there, although it's hard for you to tell now what's underpainting, what's overpainting, because they're so close related, which is intentional. It's by design. But my normal practice, which I'm doing here, is to leave cracks, gaps, spaces in between this opaque stuff and the underpainting. Let's move over here a little bit, and now that I've mentioned that, let's do it again, and I want you to watch where I put down a stroke and how, for the most part, okay, now, sorry, one thing piles up on another. Do you see this abstract pencil line that goes flying through the whole painting, from basically from the top of the painting all the way down to 6 inches from the bottom? You can't see it, but it does. Okay, that is just an abstract mark. It has nothing to do with anything realistic. It doesn't represent, like, well, maybe there's a fly fisherman over there in the lake and that's his fishing. No, nothing like that. Nothing like that. Okay, you regulars, you already know, you've heard this drill a dozen times. But no, that line doesn't represent anything. But I'm painting up to the line on both sides and leaving the pencil showing. Why? I have no idea. Well, not exactly. I do it because it makes it a better painting. Okay, that's the one answer that fits everything. Because it looks cool. That's the one size fits all answer. I've learned that in the last couple of years with grandchildren in the house. My name is not Grandpa, but Bigka. Bigka. It's my name because our first grandchild couldn't say Grandpa, so I became Bigka. Bigka, why'd you do that? You know, when they watch me paint, why did you do that? And I've come to discover, thanks to the presence of children in my studio, Vika, why'd you do that? And I discovered it's the same answer all the time. Trying to talk to a 3, 4, 5-year-old. The answer is because it makes it a better painting. Or because I thought it would make it a better painting. Because, of course, all painting is guessing what's going to look good. All right, now, so let's get back now. Sorry, I had to take a detour because of that pencil line. What I wanted to show you was notice how when I put down a mark, I almost invariably, that would be an accurate way to put it. I almost invariably leave a little gap. Now I'll touch maybe 2, like that stroke touched the one underneath it, but it's not going to touch either one side to side. And of course, in this case, right at the moment, the gaps that I'm leaving look like branches, some of those vines that I talked about in the last broadcast, right? So the little gaps certainly look like foliage, in this case, branches. But even if it wasn't, even if I weren't painting trees in the distance, I would still, if I was painting a brick wall or a house with clapboard siding, I would still use this same technique of leaving gaps so that what's underneath shows through a lot. Now, let me, on a related subject, let me explain a little bit more about this, the method, the madness, the method behind the madness. Sorry, mixing up, trying to get a little darker green. Okay, in fact, the fact that I'm trying to match this color is the very point I wanted to make. So let me back up now. Let me back up and ask the question, how do I know when it's time to start the final edit layer? I usually ask this question, how do I know when it's time to switch to oils? But basically the same answer. How do I know when it's time to go to final edit? And the answer is when the drawing is nearly perfect, when the color is nearly perfect, and when the values, which of course related to color, is nearly perfect. Let me expand now and say, so essentially all the drawing is finished. I don't have any major corrections to make, except for adding the deer. I should say that I've just saved that. More importantly, the colors are really, in my opinion, working very well in this painting right now. If they weren't working very well right now, I would not have graduated to the final edit layer. I would have kept messing around with glazes and fuzz layers and so on till the color was right. But the way it is, I'm loving this green, I'm loving this green, I'm loving the blue. This is a little bit too dark up here, intense, but no problem. It's close. That fits what I'm saying. Nearly perfect, nearly perfect, nearly perfect. All right, having said that then, when I'm in the final edit phase, like I am right now, the painting is telling me what to do, essentially, not vice versa. I'm not, what's the word? I'm not manfully forcing my will upon this submissive canvas. No, quite the contrary. The canvas is very much telling me what to do. Let's change. Okay, let's save these brushes. Let's change subject matter here for a bit, just so you can see again that same that process Doing it again. This time, let's zoom in on these columns. By the way, and William, I don't know if you're watching or not, or you'll watch later. Two really happy accidents. Bob Ross's best quote. Two happy accidents happened with regard to these columns. I didn't exactly plan it, but it happened, and I went, "Whoa, great idea!" So it wasn't my idea, but it showed up. One is that this column is entirely in shade, which sets it apart. It just gives a sense of spatial dimension, because we sense that that's in the shade of something over here. So that's going to be, I'm not going to do any highlights on that one. That's really, and then the other thing was, originally I had this tall column in the bank of columns, whatever you call that, kind of close to each other. But with this line right here, light here, dark here, this column came forward quite a bit. And it was like, oh, great idea. So now I'm seeing this column on this side of the path. The path goes over the bridge and over there. And I will even accentuate that even a little bit more. So accidents, that's my only point I'm making there. All right, now, for some reason, I feel like tackling those columns back there first instead of the one in the foreground. So my task at this moment is to match color. Plain old-fashioned, nothing, plain vanilla, nothing fancy, nothing esoteric, nothing tricky. I'm simply going to try to mix up, let's say I'm aiming for like this, some of the lightest color, the highlight color in there. Now, I hope, if you're paying attention, I hope that you're saying, man, those columns don't need any more work. Because I feel like that would be a correct observation and a correct assessment. No, that is right. Let me go back to, how do I know when it's time to go to the final edit? The list is, the drawings are nearly perfect, check. Color's perfect, value's perfect, check, check, check. So the amount of paint, so to speak, that I have to put on these columns is minimal. In fact, let me give you another. If you were live at in a painting class right now, one of the rules I give my students is that in the final edit opaque paint layer, your goal is to cover no more than 15% of the canvas. So let's say there's half, there's a quarter, there's 12.5%. So when I'm done, only an area about here, about 11 by 11, 10 by 10, 12 by 12 inches scattered throughout the whole canvas. So that's at most. And I think on this canvas, because the underpainting is working so well, I won't even be probably approaching that 15% number. In other words, 85% of the canvas, the way it is right now, is done. Does that make sense? So again, that's the number one mistake when people are trying to paint the weird Dan Nelson way. The number one mistake they make by far is that when they do get to this, what I call the final edit layer, they plaster, they cover up. Now let's zoom in again. Again, do you see the marks I just made? There's a yellow paint. There's a mark there, and there, and there, and there's a gap between each of those three brush strokes. And I have essentially matched, mixing on my palette, like a traditional painter, traditional mixing. I've matched, this color, the bright yellow. Now let me clarify that just a little bit. I've matched it, but I've made it one tick lighter, all right? Because the human eye likes to see, I went looking yesterday for my a grayscale. I'm so positive that it should be in this basket. I'm looking again, but it's not there. Okay, never mind. Because I discovered yesterday, I've used the term for years, one tick, you know, one tick lighter or darker. And it wasn't until yesterday that because I've always said whatever a tick is, but I realized yesterday, oh, wait a minute, no. I actually do have a scientific, if you will, technical definition of what a tick is. And it's on a 10-degree grayscale. White at one end, I'm sorry, you can't see my hands. White at one end, black at the other, and 9 or 10, depending whether you start with 0 or 1, in between. And to me, a tick is the difference from between a 2 and a 3, between a 3 and a 4, between a 4 and a 5, 5 and a 6, and so on and so on and so forth. So I have matched this color, oh, but not quite. If this is a 3, then what's on my brushes is a 2. Right, so there. Whew. It's getting pretty technical for some of you who care. All of a sudden, my mind goes back to my early conversations with William, my client for this painting. And we talked very specifically about sun-mottled, sun-spangled, the interplay of sun and shade on throughout the whole painting, but really especially on these ruins. And I'm feeling pretty happy at the moment because I feel like indeed that's what's really what it's feeling like. Feels like sun, flecks of sunlight. I'm going to change the color I'm using a little bit and warm it up a little bit with some orange. Let me be a broken record and go back. So I've got a slightly warmer orange color now. Very slight, different, very slight variation. Okay, now I'm going to graduate here to this mama column, the big one. It's the second time, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, that I've used my thumb to smear the paint. In fact, right, I would think sort of precisely where a lot of people would expect to see a razor sharp edge. I did it here, down here, 2 places, and just did it up there. The very place that you would some would expect to see a sharp edge, I in fact am doing a distinctly soft edge. Because why? Because I want it to look like the sunlight is just exploding off this edge of that column. Now, having said that, let's do another practice. Not principle, it's really a practice that I do. And again, it's one you've heard if you follow me, I do many times. Here it is. I'm going to exaggerate slightly just to make the point. I'm going to say always, even though being a human being, you guys know, no human being does anything always. Be that as it may, I'm going to use the language. After I've put down, in the opaque phase of painting, so like painting like a traditional oil painter, opaque paint, when I put down a color, like I just put down that yellow orange and then smeared it. When you put down a color, you come back, preferably right away, and put down a slightly lighter color than that right on top of it. Not covering the whole thing, you understand, but covering a subset of what you just put down a few minutes ago. And I'm going to go back to the remixing my color again to a more orange, because I like the color that's down here. All right, I was about to say, I do nothing but interrupt myself constantly, don't I? I was about to say, the essence of good painting is making interesting marks. We still on camera? Barely. Okay, there we go. The essence of good painting is making interesting marks. Now, learning what interesting marks are is, I believe, a lifelong adventure, lifelong process. But I'm keenly aware of that, as with every mark that I'm making here. And if you will, this is why, in my opinion, this is why abstract realism painting, which is just a label I use for my style of painting, abstract realism is much more difficult than realism. Because with realism, you don't really have to think about your marks much. You just copy. You just paint what you're looking at. You just paint the thing. You just copy. But with abstract real, and I do realism, as you know. So I'm not saying this as somebody who doesn't have the skills or the chops to do hyperrealism. I do. You can find it, all over on my website, dannelsonart.com. Go to my illustration page, look at the airbrush illustrations, or go to my portrait page and look at some of my portraits. They're pretty doggone realistic. I have one page of automotive paintings, and again, some of those are pretty tight, realistic. Anyway, so I'm focused more on the nature of the marks than I am on realism. Of course, I'm making all this up out of my head, of course, too, so that's a factor here. I'm not looking at a photograph. I did not find a... In fact, the only thing I'm using photography for in this whole painting is the eagle and the deer. Everything else is out of my imagination / memory, because that's the assignment that William gave to me. So sort of a mild fantasy-ish painting, and I think he's liking it. I say, William, I hope you're liking it, because he said after the last broadcast, he said he was liking it, so I hope he still is. Right? I'm just about ready to move somewhere else, to move on to painting something else, but before I just applied a bunch of orange, for want of a better term, here. So let's do that other thing. That is, now I added some titanium white to that little pile of orange that I had on my palette. And I'm going to come in here and do some slightly lighter. Now, if it's too bright, it won't work. It won't have the magic effect that I'm after. It has to be pretty close, one tick, right? It has to be just one tick lighter, brighter than what's already there. And of course, like for instance, are we zoomed in all the way? let's take just this one stroke right here. There's a mark there and a gap. Remember I've talked about gaps? Mark, gap, another mark, another gap, and so on. Let's just take the long one in the middle. So I've got the lighter orange, and I just have that, the right hand end of that stroke now is slightly lighter. One of the reasons that this particular technique is, in my opinion, so important is even though most viewers won't be able to articulate or explain what it is they're seeing, a really good art critic could see it and name it, but most people won't. But the viewer's eye, mind, brain will discern intuitively that it's the same color, quote unquote, the same color orange here, 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 because it was exactly the same color. Does that make sense? And I believe that that creates an uncomfortability. It creates an uncomfortable feeling. It's redundant, it's boring, it's repetitious. And again, even though I wouldn't expect any non-artist to look at my painting, any painting, and say, you know what, I see it's the same color here and here, and that's really bothering me. Do you understand that? No, 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 no. That's not where we're after. We're not after people, the viewer, understanding. That's not their job. It's my job to understand what it is that is or is not working in a painting. Right? So those columns may be all finished. Probably not, because we have 4 more layers to go on this painting. I'll talk about that in a minute if I remember to come back to it. But I'm going to leave them for right now for this very old standard. This is not a Dan Nelsonism. This is art professorism. And a good art painting teacher will say to the student, now move around the camp, move around the painting. Don't work on just one area. Don't work on just one thing for too long. Move around, move around, move around. Bring the whole painting up together. And that is indeed what most people do. That's what most teachers teach, and I think that's what most students or most painters should do. So that's what I'm doing, all right? So first of all, it helps stave off boredom a little bit, right? So right now I'm going to try to mix up some pale blue. Once again, the canvas, the painting in its current condition is telling me what to do. I don't have to, scratch my chin and say, oh, golly, what should I do now? I'm not lost at all. So I've mixed up, it's this right at the moment, it's just pure phthalo and titanium white. Yeah, as I thought, it's too blue, so I'm going to add some little tiny bit of Naples yellow. Naples yellow it looks like a yellow ochre light. It's a light version of yellow ochre. Now, let me be facetious for a minute. Have I ever told you about how to paint, that when you paint you should leave little gaps between the highlights? I'm being silly because, of course, I've said that at least twice already today. Yeah, so watch me. That's exactly what I'm doing again. And in painting the sky, that can be particularly instructive for some students because, I mean, goodness gracious, everybody knows how to paint a sky, right? The sky is blue. That's the sound of plastering. That's just in case you didn't know. By the way, I did something right there that I haven't done much of yet. I just did a scumbling. I let the brush drag across the bumps on the canvas, so the paint only stuck on the little bumps of the canvas. I know you can't see that, but so that's a distinctly translucent stroke, which again is one of the tricks that I employ very much. That is the usage of translucent marks as well as opaque ones. There's something happening here. It's not good. I have this dark purplish branch. Okay, it's going to get wiped out. So this is edit. This is final edit, because it accidentally ended up being right at the boundary between sky and tree. There was a branch. Coterminous, or kissing objects. You know, coterminous means two objects that end at the same spot. Does that make sense? Anyway, I hope it does. I am making sense. I hope you understand my language. How about that? That's not good teaching, is it? For the teacher said, I am making sense whether you understand it or not. That's a sign of a bad teacher right there. I don't care whether you're learning anything or not. By golly, I am teaching. I did take a really good pedagogy class years ago at master's level, and that was one of the first things we learned. Just because they didn't use this language, but just because the teacher's flapping his lips doesn't mean teaching is taking place. Teaching only takes place when the student actually learns something. I learned that lesson fairly well, I would say. Now, you all know, of course, that a sky goes from light near the horizon to darker blue as it goes up. So I've got this very pale, let me get my eagle reference up here for a minute, because I'm already coming into the eagle's tail. So I've got this very pale, yellowish blue. It's titanium white, of course, mostly, with a little bit of phthalo and even a littler bit of Naples yellow. So it has that slight yellowish cast. But it doesn't, normally your brain says, oh yeah, but a blue plus yellow makes green, so technically what you're using is green, right? Yeah, I guess technically that might be true, but in actuality, no, it does not feel like a green at all. It feels like a very pale, blue. All right, I'm going to go back for a minute just while I'm painting out. And by the way, I do not obligate myself to paint for hours on this. I will be doing the final edit layer for a good while. I would guess on this painting, the final edit layer will take me 2 hours. That's my guess. And but I'm not going to obligate myself to broadcast the whole time. First of all, it just gets boring. But I want to go back for a minute, because this might be. I put down my picture of my eagle too soon. Let's get it back up here. This could be instructive for some of you. Back to the subject of interesting marks. The essence of good painting is making interesting marks. And what doth an interesting mark make is a lifelong pursuit. I mean, I'm still learning more and more, you know, what kind of mark is interesting. Now, let me go ahead and give you part of the answer. Oh, my wife is calling me. I'm going to have to take a break here in a few minutes and call her back. The wife, Nancy, does get through, even if I'm broadcasting. Sorry, folks. But let me stop. Do you see this abstract pencil mark that I mentioned earlier? I painted around it down here in the green, and I've just painted around here. But at some point, it's too much of a good thing. Did you get it? So I'm still going to let it be there, but I've broken it up a little bit. All right, let me wrap up one thought, and then I'll take a break and come and call my wife. What is an interesting mark? And one of the answers, not the only one, but one of the answers to that question is an interesting mark is a mark that your hand, or maybe your left hand even, is a mark that your hand makes when you're not in hyper control mode. So, holding the brush side saddle, or holding the brush by the end like this, even though I don't like that grip. I like holding it, far back from but when you hold your brush in a non-death control grip, you don't have perfect control over the brush. It wiggles and jiggles and does things you don't expect. Okay, I'm going to sign off with this, so pay attention. Most of the time, those wiggles and jiggles, things that you don't create, in fact, your hand does it without your permission, those often are some of the best and most interesting marks that you can make, all right? Now, that's not all there is to interesting marks, but that's a very key concept. That's part of the reason we don't paint like this, because those are not interesting. When you paint like that, you're not making interesting marks. You're making control freak marks, if I may. All right, so I have to take a quick break. I'll be back in just a few minutes, I hope, after I talk to Nancy. So if you want to hang on, just do that. Quick break. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. All right, I'm back. I don't know if you're back or not, but I'm back. Hey, buddy, I just saw your comment. My goodness, I'm way behind, aren't I? That was 25 minutes ago. Sorry about that. Well, thanks for watching. Hope you're still with me here. Glad you like it so far. All right, so I ran through that really quickly. Let me just repeat. This is especially for you art students. What is an interesting mark? And one of the answers to that question is it's the semi-controlled, might be the best term for it, the almost controlled marks that your hand makes, the natural marks. And that's really important, because many of you early journey painters, you young in your painting life, no matter how old you are in your chronological life, I know that many of you get mad, literally get angry at your hand when it does those little spastic, uncontrolled movements, and you literally get mad at your hand. And I'm here to tell you, stop that. Those things that are making you mad is actually you painting at your best very often. And again, one of the key secrets is simply don't use that control grip. Paint slightly out of control. You'll probably paint better. All right. I am just about tired of sky already, and I'm not nearly finished. Hey, I know. Let's do a quick clinic, if you will, on sky holes. So let me move you over here a little bit and raise you up. Forgive me while I jerk you all over the place. All right. There's already quite a few sky holes. Badly named. They should be called tree holes, but that's another matter. And this is especially again for you aspiring painters. Quiz time. No, before the quiz. First of all, the color of the sky, let's, like over here, I have a large open, we see what color the sky is. We who are looking at the painting, we see by what's over here. The sky holes need to be exactly, are you listening? I keep thinking I'm saying this so clearly, and then I run into students who don't get it and don't do it. The sky holes need to be exactly, did you hear that word exactly yet? How many times do I need to say this? The sky holes need to be exactly, now I'm becoming irritating, the same color as the sky. All right, and of course the sky changes color, right? From here to here. All right, so that's settled. Now here's quiz time. So should sky holes be hard-edged? Hard-edged? Should they be hard-edged or soft-edged? Somebody hummed a little Jeopardy tune for us. Dum bum 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 dum bum 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 bum. All right. There is a correct answer to that question. The correct answer is both. That's a huge part of what makes sky holes look like holes in the tree. Again, they should be called tree holes, but that's another time for another day. In this painting, they actually are. Up here, they actually are sky holes. So technically, variety. Sky hole, that's part of a big part of what makes them look believable. So that they don't become dots. By the way, that's where, on my channel, that's where the term dotification came from. Is if you do sky holes poorly, they become sky dots. The dreaded sky dots. And then you need to embark on a season of de-dotification. All right, this is all come on previous broadcast, years gone by. All right, so that's technically the correct answer to the question. Should sky holes be hard or soft? And the answer is both. Now, because I employ this fuzz layer as a separate and distinct layer, I've already done a whole bunch of sky holes fuzzy. So I've got a bunch of soft ones already done. So what I'm focusing on mostly right now, by the way, did you see that mark that my left hand just made? That spastic, not quite in control mark? That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. That I didn't do that on purpose. My hand just had a mind of its own and made a crazy mess. But I'm going to leave it. It's a good mark, as are most of them that are made by your spastic hand. All right, now I have a counterintuitive addendum to make to the quiz. Should sky holes be hard or soft? And technically the answer is both, and that's key. You should be aspiring toward that lofty goal. But, big but, come on up. If you are fairly early in your painting journey, then forget everything I just said. For you, sky holes should be hard-edged, just for you beginners, okay? Until you really can produce, again, sky holes are a universal thing in landscape painting. Until you can produce, it's not easy, by the way. Learning about them and learning to do them are two very different things. All right, so until you can nail it, make all of your sky holes hard-edged. Otherwise, you're just screwing up. Now, here's why I say that. I have a lot of guesses, but be that as it may, I'm not going to get into it. I'm just going to let it stand. Just going to let my statement stand. Student painters, and I'm going to use the more insulting term now. Student painters seem to have, what's the word? An uncanny knack when they're trying to do sky holes. They have a knack for creating horrible, forgive me, sky smudges. They don't look like sky coming through the trees at all. Let me back up so you guys can kind of see this in context. So see how that looks like, pretty much like foliage in front of the sky, right? All right, so until you can achieve some degree of skill, and I'm telling you how to achieve that skill, make all of your sky holes hard-edged, because all students make them too soft-edged. They don't apply enough paint. They're smudgy. All right, that's as far as I want to go with that. I'm running out of energy for that topic. By the way, you see this right here? See that red mark? I'm pretty sure that's part of the original abstract painting that was slapped down on this canvas before I started the painting itself. And that's just one little place, that little delicious bit of red, which you better believe I'm not going to cover up. That would be a travesty. That's a good example of why I do that crazy abstract stuff that I do. All right, since I'm doing sky holes, let's continue over on for just a bit over here on this side of the painting. And Ray asked a question a while ago, am I going to do light on the tree trunk? Yeah, absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. Now, not as bright as this, of course, not to compete. This is the focal zone, I'll call it that. The focal zone on this painting is quite obvious, quite strong. Increased so because of the presence of the eagle. I'm sorry, so that's what you call a psychological focal point. If you put a human being in a painting, like one human being in a painting, a single lone figure in a painting, forget all of the rules about composition and focal point. That lone figure will suck up a whole bunch of attention from the viewer because of and that's what I call a psychological focal point, okay? Now, backing down from a human being, if you put an animal, likewise, so that eagle is creating a very strong psychological focal point, and it just so happens that it's also really close to the visual focal point. So again, the focal zone of this painting is very, very clear, and I'm quite happy with the composition. Buddy, I don't know which category on my website I'm going to put this painting. Do I put it on the... Yeah, I probably will. I'll probably put it on my fantasy page. You guys can see some of my old fantasy. I love doing fantasy paintings. I really do. Thanks, buddy. I just haven't been able to make them pay. I haven't. My sales in that department have been very disappointing over the decades. So even though I love doing them, I haven't sold an awful lot of them. By the way, let me point out something while I'm way up here at the top. Boundary ratios. I know you guys are getting a terrible glare. Let me back up and see if it gets any better. Not much, a little bit. Hang on, let's try this. Yeah, okay, that's better. I think I can paint with that light off. Boundary ratios. In a rectangle or square, the four boundaries of the painting should have a variety of color breaks. And this painting was in danger of having dark green all the way across the top. In other words, a boundary number of 1. That would be a visual mistake. So I'm being, in the last several minutes, very careful to make sure that my sky punches through the top boundary of the painting. So now we have a boundary ratio of maybe 3. 1, 2, I don't know if 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whichever. But I'll be doing the same thing over here. We're going to have a boundary, it looks like, of dark green, light green, dark green. So that's 1, 2, 3, then dark, and then probably some brown. Anyway, 5 over here, so on. So not only is it bad to have one color, and the most typical is when somebody's doing is a landscape and there's blue sky all the way across the top of the painting. That's one of the most common mistakes made in landscape painting. All right, I'm tired of sky, same thing. In fact, I'm just about tired. My feet are getting tired. you can only paint as much as your feet can stand. No, that's not true. I have a tall chair right over there that I can pull up, lower the painting down a little bit. But I think that I've really droned on long enough. Buddy, if you don't mind, I'm going to continue to paint without your company. But I won't go too long. If I have the energy later this evening, I will broadcast again. Let me zoom in a little bit just so you can see. Let me talk about the things I've got in mind. First of all, of course, doing some detail on the ego. Let me just demonstrate what I do not mean. Behold the tongue. Tongue painting, right? That would be no. That would be an error. That would be a foul. That'd be a yellow card, if not a red card. So the eagle has to be painted in the same style, the same energy, brush stroke as the rest of the painting. Much of this stuff out here is finished. I just don't know how finished. So this painting, I'm clearly kind of starting in the focal zone and moving outward. So let me, again, for those of you who won't be able to join me later, what do I do after this? Isn't the painting finished? Well, in years past, this used to be my last layer, but not anymore. After this final edit layer, I'm going to do a broken color layer that almost certainly glaze the whole canvas, the whole painting, whatever colors I want. It's just like having, if you can imagine, probably most of you don't do Photoshop, but you can imagine having a picture on your computer screen and you just do all these sliders up, down, more red, more blue, more purple, more brown, more darker, more lighter, and so on. That's what that glaze, in essence, it's a hyper-controlled process without the downside that usually comes with hyper-control. So anyway, next is broken color, then a glaze, then sparkle, palette knife for variety of texture, and impasto, so some thick paint at the very end, just because human beings, for some reason, I think I know it has to do with variety, but thick paint at the end for variety. So whatever that is, 4 or 5 more layers. It won't change the painting dramatically, of course. It'll just make it a little more interesting here and there and here and there and here and there. I look forward to doing the lake. It's almost the color I want it. I might pump up the blue down here a little bit. I definitely want like almost mist coming off the water, or sunlight reflecting, I don't know which, but I don't want that, the top of the lake, I do not want it to be a razor sharp edge. That would be a mistake. All right, I've rambled long enough. Thanks again for your company. Thanks, buddy, for watching. If you have any comments to make, go ahead and make them. But so far, I'm having fun. I'm enjoying it very much. And of course, as we all know, that's what's important right here. As long as I'm having fun, that's all that matters. And yeah, whoa, I lost my chat here. Let's see if I can get my chat back. No, evidently I can't. Hang on. I don't always completely know how to operate a iPad. This was my wife's. I inherited it from her about a year or so ago. Okay, doesn't look like I've missed anything. So I will bid you all a fond adieu Thursday evening. And if I come back, as I said, if I'm doing some good fun painting later this evening, I'll do another broadcast. What you see me doing here is softening some edges. It's like, oh wait, a little bit too hard there. A little bit too much hardness. There, it's better. All right, thanks. Bye.